Hello everyone, Ron again, and in this video we're going to talk about whole notes and half notes, and we're going to talk about quantization. So I'm going to show you how the different note values are represented in FL Studio and possibly other DAWs, I don't know. I haven't gotten heavily into other DAWs, but I'm going to show you how they're represented and translate the terminology into music theory. So if you're using FL Studio at least, I can say that after this video, you will understand how things like steps relate to music theory. Now, as an aside, this visual representation that I've been constructing for the past two videos is scaled differently than how it would appear in FL Studio itself. So even though the scale is still correct, if you think of this as a quarter note, this is actually a bar long. And you can tell by the top where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, because that signifies what measure of the song you're actually looking at. So this note spans the first measure. This note spans the second measure, the third, the fourth. However, the lesson still does hold. So in this video, I'm also going to be creating a scale that is actually the real value that you would see if you were using all these things, because I don't want you to think that when you put a quarter note in that it's going to be like going from 1 to 2, because that's just wrong. Therefore, pattern 6. But first, I'm going to explain what a half note and a whole note are, and they're both very simple. So once you understand the idea that in 4/4 time, a quarter note is 1 beat, and there are 4 beats in a measure, the lower 4, if you remember, it tells you that it's going to be quarter notes that represent 1 beat, because you turn the 4 on top into a 1, or whatever number is on top. It could be a 3/4, right? It could be a 6/4. But the point is that when you turn the numerator to a 1, the number on the bottom tells you what is a beat, right? So 1/4 is a quarter. Therefore, the beat is with quarter notes. If you see 5/8 time, which is commonly seen in different genres, you know, especially, well, they're not really like mainstream, it's not used heavily, but you can certainly find it on drumline and in different pieces. And there's 7/8 time. What that would mean, 7/8 time, is that there are 7 beats per measure. You turn the 7 to a 1, that's 1/8. So 1 beat is an eighth note. So every measure is going to be 7 beats long, but it's going to be 7/8 notes long. Now, with that being said, you understand that a quarter note in 4/4 time is 1 beat, and there are 4 quarter notes per measure. And you understand by now, if I've done my job correctly, that as we divide, because this entire process is called subdivision, when you break things down into smaller parts, as we divide, a beat gets faster and shorter. But if we were to multiply, the beat would get longer and slower. Case in point, if I was to multiply 1/8 times 2, that's 2/8, and that is 1/4, which, if you're familiar with math, is larger. 1/4 is a bigger piece than 1/8, so a quarter note is slower. But if you multiply a quarter note times 2, then 2/4 gives you 1/2, which is a half note, right? So a half note has the same relationship to a quarter note that an eighth note has to a 16th note, you know, and that a quarter note has to an eighth note, and that is twice as long, basically. So if a quarter note in 4/4 time is worth 1 beat, then a half note is worth 2 beats. And if you multiply 1/2 times 2, you get 1/1, which is 1. So that would tell you that a whole note is worth 4 beats. So that is the point of this lesson, to tie everything together. If you have a whole note, that's 4 beats. If you have a half note, that's 2 beats. If you have a quarter note, that's 1 beat, all in 4/4 time. If you have an eighth note, that is half of 1 beat. If you have a 16th note, that's a fourth of 1 beat. And, well, if you have a triplet, that's a third of 1 beat. If you remember, an eighth note triplet is a third of 1 beat because they have a 3-to-2 relationship with eighth notes. So where 2 eighth notes fit, 3 eighth note triplets will fit. So you think of it that way, an eighth note triplet is a third of 1 beat. A sextuplet or a 16th note triplet is a sixth of 1 beat, and a 32nd note is an eighth of 1 beat. And it's not going to get any faster than that because of human speed limitations, both between hearing and playing. You're not going to be able to move your hands that fast. Drumming relies heavily on finger movement when you're playing chord style, and wrist movement, and you use your arms when you're going at the fastest speeds for playing the fastest rolls. The sticks are heavier than concert band sticks, but the snare drums have more rebound. If you're a drummer, you'll understand what I just said, but it's not important to music production. It's just something to know. My point is you can't play that fast. So that's as high as it's going to go. You may see something where it's 60 beats per minute and you're playing 64th notes. But in all honesty, if somebody was going to transcribe that, they might just double the tempo so they could write less. Why would you want to draw so many notes and have it be potentially confusing if somebody doesn't know what a 64th note looks like, right? Plus, you got to think about it as, would a composer be writing 64th notes for like a flute player? Certainly not for a tuba player, because the melodies are going to be up higher and the ranges that we hear better, like the mid-range, right? Maybe a saxophone is going to play something fast, or a trumpet player is going to play something fast, but not 64th notes, right? Trumpet player is not playing the drum roll. A drummer is. And if you read drum music, we describe a roll a different way. It's written differently. Like, it tells you where doubles are because we can double a note. That's how a roll is created, using the rebound stroke. That was a long tangent. Anyway, my point is that you're subdividing, when you think of this concept, you're subdividing all of the different time values from one entire measure. You're expressing them as different lengths, and we just are naming them, right? So with that being said, one more time, a whole note is 4 beats, a half note is 2 beats, a quarter note is 1 beat, an eighth note is half of 1 beat, a 16th note is a fourth of 1 beat, a eighth note triplet is a third of 1 beat, and a sextuplet is a sixth of 1 beat, and the 32nd note is an eighth of 1 beat. You could think of 3 quarter note triplets as 3 notes over the span of 2. The same way that a eighth note triplet would be 3 beats over the span of 2 eighth notes. So if we go to the top right here, you'll notice where it says snap to grid in the upper left hand corner. And what the grid does is it makes the notes conform to the grid lines that are in the back. Now, because this is set to bar, the grid lines each represent one measure. So there's the 1, 2, 3, 4. And it tells you this is measure 2, measure 3, measure 4, so on. Right? If you switch it to something like beat, the grid lines show you where 1 beat lies within that measure. So, to quickly go over them, when you have line, and you have cell, and you have main, those do unique things. Because if you look right here, you'll notice this is the main one. I have none set because the playlist also has grid snapping. And so it would make this piano roll grid become the same as the one that's in the playlist. Line moves the note to the next line. So let's say if I had a note like this and I zoom in, as I drag it, it's going to try to conform to the next line. You can see that it's doing less than 16th notes, but those are subdivisions of 16th notes. If I go to cell, it's just going to move it in a very similar fashion, but it's because it's a whole note that's moving that way. If it was offbeat, it's trying to move it to snap to the cell. So those are what those three do. If you have none and you put a note here, it lets you move it freely. It's not conformed to the grid at all. So the more important thing to take away is, how does this relate to the musical terminology that we've been establishing for the past 2 videos? If you see bar, the snap is going to be an entire bar or a whole note. If I drag it, it's going to become a bar longer. If I cut it and then I drag this, you see that it just becomes an entire full measure longer. And you see the grid lines in the background that are showing you the same thing. If I make it a beat, and let's say I have this, and then I transform it, B for brush, and then you can paint the same type of note, then it becomes quarter notes, right? So now, beats gives you quarter notes. Bar gives you whole notes, right? Because a whole note is 4 beats. So 1 beat is quarter note because we're in 4/4 time. If you wanted to make half notes, you have to set it to beat and then drag it until it's two beats long. So here, let's color these things. So we have quarter notes. Now remember how I broke down earlier the way you think about how these time values relate to one another, because it's going to become relevant right here. So you have half a beat, which I said an eighth note value was the value of half a beat. Right? So I'll make it a different color so it's easy to see. And then that is going to paint the length of a note as the last one that you clicked in FL Studio. So you may have to adjust it, but notice that it's decreasing by the value of half a beat. So I click this one and now it will paint eighth notes. So as we're quantizing, bar is 4 notes because it's a whole note, or 4 beats. Beat is 1 beat, which is a quarter note. Half a beat is an eighth note. And the grid conforms in the background. You can see that it's eighth notes, and I can zoom in. So you have eighth notes that I just painted, and the grid lines are marking them. So now let's continue. Now you have a third of a beat, which is, for this one, you will want to click a quarter note and then decrease that by thirds because it's going to be harder. But you can see that the grid once again conforms, and now I have triplets. So a third of a beat is an eighth note triplet. So we got a bar, 4. We have a half note, which is 2 beats. We have a quarter note, which is 1 beat. We have an eighth note, which is half a beat. And we have an eighth note triplet, which is a third of 1 beat. Changing the color, we have a fourth of a beat, which is a 16th note. So again, click the quarter note, make the quarter note shorter, and you can see that the grid again has conformed. So now there are 4 of them, and you can paint from either direction because it might be easier to see. So now, if I take these and lower them, take these and lower them, copy these, Control B, so it makes a copy right next to them. Drag them down, it might be a bit easier to see. Or actually, I can move them over. So you got triplets. You have whole and half notes up here. Quarter notes, eighth notes. Here you got quarter notes, triplets. You can also highlight, hold down shift, drag, and it will copy. And now we have quarter notes and 16th notes. And I really want to drive this lesson home. So 1/3 of a beat, triplets. 1/4 of a beat, 16th notes. 1/2 of a beat, eighth notes. A beat, quarter notes. A bar, whole notes. Okay, 1/6 of a beat. I change the color, click a triplet, place it here. Notice it becomes about half as long. Now I can paint them. 1/6 of a beat, sextuplets. Divide them up a little bit so it'll be easier to see. Put these down here, put those up there. Take this, hold shift to duplicate, and then drag it down. So these are quarter notes. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 1/6 of a beat, sextuplets. And there are 6 for every quarter note. And this is accurately scaled. There are 4 quarter notes, and they span 1 bar or 1 measure. Now, what is a step? A step, put simply, is a 16th note. You can see, if you look here, that the grid conforms to the timing of a 16th note. So it's just another way of saying it's a 16th note. In fact, a step is 1/4 of a beat. It's just that up here you get into subdivisions of a 16th note. So you get into a half a step, that's a 32nd note. You can see that the grid modifies again. Click a 16th note, place it here, cuts it in half. See, then there are 8 of them. There are 4 16th notes. There is 1 quarter note, which, as I explained, 1 quarter note can fit 4 16th notes and it can fit 8 32nd notes. So if you wanted to paint 32nd notes, you would put half a step. And if you want 1/4 of a step, 64th notes. You know, it's not likely that you're going to use this, but I mean, hey, 1/3 of a step is going to be half of a sextuplet. So I take a sextuplet here, paint it here. You can see the grid lines conforming, even though I can't zoom in anymore. It becomes half as long. I can paint it so that it would fit 12 notes into the quarter note. A sixth would be, well, half of that. But as I said, no one is going to play anything that fast, so that's going to be 24 notes in the span of 1 quarter note. You're never going to play anything that's really this fast. I mean, you could add it and see what you come up with. That is extremely fast. But the main point was to show the subdivisions, and I really can't stress them enough, just so I can keep repeating this, so hopefully it will be stuck to your brain by the end of this video. So, from the top, a bar is a whole note, a beat is a quarter note, half a beat is an eighth note, 1/3 of a beat is an eighth note triplet, 1/4 of a beat is a 16th note, a 1/6 of a beat is a sextuplet or a 16th note triplet, a step is a 16th note, half of a step is a 32nd note, and for the most part, that's all you're going to use. You know, so I hope that this makes sense. And if you made it this far in the video, I thank you. Like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know if there's anything that was confusing that I can revisit in later videos. And I hope you have an awesome day. As usual, peace.